Hi, I'm Stephen Price.
Hello, I'm Cara Githens.
This is the Innkeepers, a podcast by Sanctuary Inn. At Sanctuary Inn, we believe we are called to equip, refresh, and restore God's global workers.
On this podcast, we will be interviewing guests who have much to teach us about the many facets of missionary care. Let's learn together and be encouraged to press on in the work God has given each one of us to do.
Cara, can you take a minute and introduce our guest to us?
Yes, today we are honored to interview Denise Beck. She is the Executive Director of Velvet Ashes. Her life has been shaped by her years in South Sudan. Her heart for women grew there who take the unknown and carve out beauty in all of its forms. She was introduced to Velvet Ashes many years ago, and she found a place there that celebrated the beauty that she loved as well. She now currently serves with Velvet Ashes, and she seeks to provide connection and courage for women in their cross-cultural lives. It has been a reminder of one of God's beautiful gifts in her life. Her favorite places to be are anywhere where her kids are, her 4 kids, and next to her husband, no matter what country. He is the director of Barnabas International, and they have a lot of opportunity to serve the Lord together. So thank you so much for joining us in this conversation today. So today we are so grateful to have Denise Beck with us here. Denise, thank you so much for your time.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so could you just share a little bit about yourself and your story and kind of what drew you into working with Velvet Ashes?
I would love to. Yes, so my family and I, we served in South Sudan, northern Uganda for about 5 years. And I have 4 kids who are scattered all over the US right now, TCKs who are now young adults, as my husband and I are back in different roles in different ministries. But when you ask about what drew me to Velvet Ashes, I think it's more of a story of, so I was a team leader's wife. We had a team in South Sudan. It was during a civil war, and I was in charge of, if you want to call it that way, I was caring for, looking after these other wives on the team where we had to live with go bags constantly because of the war, food insecurity. Even for us, it was so hard to get food to where we were. And literally, I felt like we were like shriveling like raisins, and yet I was supposed to be pouring out and caring for these women. And so I tried to scrape together, let's do a retreat. Let's go into Uganda where at least we can have some hot showers and maybe a fan, like maybe an air conditioner if we went to a really fancy place, But I did not have anything left in me to actually plan it well. I was so tapped out myself that all I remember is I remember we went. I remember we got to get out of the country for a bit, but there was nothing of substance or value that we did not come back in full and energized and thankful to the Lord for what he did. It was more of we survived that retreat, Okay. And so when we came back to the States, my family left for medical reasons. The kids were suffering from some anxiety related things. My daughter actually had to go to the hospital for a few months. It was kind of an abrupt leave. And so we're a little bit like deer in the headlight kind of transition off of the field. And somebody told me about Velvet Ashes. We actually entered into the country the same time as the founder of Velvet Ashes to the same city. And so I'm hearing about this thing that existed that I had no idea about. And it is at that time online retreats packaged for women who live anywhere in the world. It's planned for you. There's the teaching. There's a worship set, which back in the day, you guys, been on the field. Remember when you didn't get to just hear worship and see it, experience it, or anything. That was done for you. There was exercise, there's art, there's this whole in a package retreat. And so I just pushed play and experienced it. And then I was sold. And it was not the right timing, but my education is in crisis and trauma counseling. And eventually I got a phone call just saying, hey, would you be interested in being the executive director of Velvet Ashes? And I was already sold. I was already 100% Yeah, absolutely. I can vouch for the need. I can vouch for the quality. I would love to tie my name to this organization. And so that is a little bit about how I came to be associated with Velvet Ashes.
That's
Mm,
great.
thank you.
And you having experienced just the burnout firsthand and how this can be a great tool and see how this would become part of your passion.
Yes.
So, what could you share a little bit more in depth about Velvet Ashes and how it meets the needs of women around the world, and just kind of talk about how being even online like that can still
Mhm.
ministers when you can't be there in person to interact.
Yeah. Well, since the time of the retreat, we have now grown into more spaces where we offer that online care for women. But I think there's a couple of stories that I'd love to share. Number one is about a girl named Allie, and she was somebody that was really all into Velvet Ashes retreats, and she led them. She would gather groups of women. This was in Africa, and she would lead retreats whenever we had one available. And there was this one retreat in particular. After COVID, we kind of added another retreat called the Unplugged for everybody that was having online fatigue. And this was something where you just got away. So she was doing this retreat, and that particular theme that year was called Here I Am. And it was based on the Hebrew word Hineni, which is kind of the idea of, I'm saying yes to you with my hands open before I even know what you're going to ask me to do. And so she's 8 months pregnant. She's leading this retreat. She gets back to her home. Some traumatic things happen, but a couple of weeks later, she ends up giving birth. And she said she and her husband, who he wasn't even sure he was going to get to be there for the birth, start noticing that the midwives were looking at them kind of funny, and they didn't know why. And they look at their baby and they realized, oh, she has Down syndrome. And they had no idea. But she said that I knew that the Lord had already prepared me 2 weeks ago at the Velvet Ashes retreat to say yes to whatever he was going to place in my hands. And he placed this girl in my hands. And so she named her baby Hineni, knowing that the Lord had already been ministering to her. And that, was just one example of like, how did this online retreat, the Lord used that to minister to this woman in a remote place in Africa. We also have something called connection groups, which is where there's 2 times a year where we gather women and put them in groups with people all over the world, not on your team, maybe in a like season of life with you, but your connection is you're a woman who's living cross-culturally, right? So it becomes this safe space for 8 weeks where you have prompted questions, and these women become your mentors, and they become the people that you ask advice from. And more often than not, these groups have continued to meet after the 8 weeks. And the stories that we hear, like this one of a woman who, after a couple of years of this, her son actually ended up dying tragically in America, and she's cross-culturally. And these are the women from countries all over the world that hopped on a plane and went to be with her because they got her. They got her life. They've been walking with her for so long. And so there's things like that Velvet Ashes does. We do a podcast too, where we interview women and different stories. We retell stories of people who lived and served cross-culturally. We call it the Legacy Podcast, just emphasizing the legacy that women leave. We have an online conference that we try to really bring in great speakers. Last year, Jenny Allen was one of our keynote speakers, Katie Davis Majors, Mektas Hadith. So we've got these great speakers, and then 13 workshops that are just bringing real life things, meeting the needs of like, how do you do your ministry well? How do you deal with grief? How do you write a liturgy? How do you, like these tactical things for women? And so we're just constantly thanking the Lord for a digital space and looking for ways that we can be the conduit where the Lord brings connection, resources, makes them feel seen, gives them a place to feel heard. We have writers that write for us that live all over the world that contribute to our weekly blogs, and so lots of different things like that. I mentioned to you before we got on that we have a book coming out. We have published one book, which was a collection of essays written by women all over the world, which was more of like the nitty gritty type of stuff. Our book that's coming out in the fall is about the laughter, the funny things that happen when you're on the field, just collection of essays from women who are living all over the world. So those are just some of the ways we exist to try to be this online living room, collecting place of stories and relationships and resources for women who live cross-culturally.
So you have this online living room, but you also mentioned to me earlier that you do have physical retreats where people can come to as well, right?
We do. So there are a lot, maybe not a lot, but there are organizations that do in-person stuff. They do in-person retreats, and that is what they do. We don't focus so much on the in-person space, but once a year, we do hold an in-person retreat, and it's been in Tuscany for the last couple of, we're actually getting ready to go at the time of this recording. And we get to bring the online experience in person. We bring the same worship, we bring the same teachers, we bring the same workout people who have recorded it online for our community. We do it live in this villa in Italy where we are the only people there. It's not a conference center that we're sharing with other people. We absorb every inch and space of this villa in Italy and just get to be in person. And so it's a really unique, a little bit different than maybe the way other organizations are doing in person, but we just do this one time a year. And boy, it shapes our content. Sitting across, getting to chat and have real conversations, it shapes what we do and how we offer content for the rest of the year.
Yeah. I love that model though, that it's something ongoing year round wherever you are in the world. I mean, I'm guessing many people can't make it to Tuscany for a
No,
but you can, access something even in a closed country, perhaps, the resources that you guys are providing, and that I'm sure is a blessing to many. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
so what are some of the unique challenges that you hear that women are facing today in the context that we're living in?
Mm. Well, I really feel like this could be the entire podcast in one
Yeah,
question
yeah.
we could talk about, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't, do you guys realize that 72% of missionaries in the world are women?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you think about that is a reality, but that they can have the least defined role on a team, right? So sometimes they enter as a single, they get married, then they become a mother, like their role is constantly changing. And it sometimes is like, well, is raising a family a role or is it just my job? I could do that anywhere. And so there's this real identity crisis sometimes when you're a woman on the field that's just inherent with the life stages of being a woman, but also it can be complicated by the way women are perceived and received onto team. And so different teams and sending organizations interact differently with women and give them different levels of authority, levels of voices on the team. And so those can be some of the struggles that women might enter into. Some of them are single, and that is a whole nother topic. Some of them, which, we can get into that whole dynamic later, but all of them are women who are going to feel the tension of, I have aging parents. Wherever they are in their life, their parents are aging. They're experiencing nieces and nephews' birthdays that they're never going to be able to be a part of. They're watching things happen in their hometown. I remember when I lived on the field, my hometown of Joplin, Missouri was devastated by a tornado. And oh my goodness, that impact of not being there to help with people whose homes, my half of my town, homes are lost and I couldn't do anything. I mean, all of the normal struggles of just being there. And then I can't not talk about the idea of spiritual abuse. So that's something that's becoming more of a topic that we're hearing about now. And as I talk to and sit with different therapists, counselors who are dealing with doing work and research in this area, the majority of their clients are women who are, and this is just, I'm just talking about spiritual abuse on the mission field. So we've had spiritual abuse in churches be more of a topic, but spiritual abuse on the mission field is now becoming an area of research, and majority of those experiencing it are women. And so in light of that, you also, if you dig deeper and ask the question, women are also the ones who choose to remain in spiritual abuse on the mission field in order to not leave their ministry. Because in so many ways, there are more areas where women feel like they're making an impact in ministry if they're serving cross-culturally. they've got more opportunities. And so if they're finally on a team that is allowing them to have access and ministry and impact, but yet they're being spiritually abused, they might think, I'm still making a difference here. I still have the ability. I still can minister in ways that I can't in the American church. So I'm going to sit here under the spiritual abuse because it allows me to be here. And so you have these types of tensions with women who are serving that maybe people aren't aware of, that they are undergoing that type of tension and oppression just to be able to be there and serve.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just jump from there because we do want to talk about married versus single, but you talked about the area of spiritual abuse, and we have a question that asks what are the hidden or unexpected struggles on the mission field. So maybe why don't you just talk to our listening audience, give a brief definition of the spiritual abuse, and then kind of highlight some of the ways that you're seeing it being played out.
Well, I will make a caveat to say that we have worked a lot with a guy named Silas West, who's doing a lot of research on this. He's actually writing a book called Silencing the Lambs, which we wish he would hurry up and finish. But he has done a webinar for us at Velvet Ashes that is available for anybody to get and purchase and watch and sit under his teaching on this. And he defines spiritual abuse really well, but also just gives some tools. And he gives some great questions that you can ask and yourself to even ascertain, am I being spiritually abused? But a lot of times it is when you are being, I'm going to mess up the definition of this, but when somebody is using spiritual language to oppress you, to keep you from having an opinion, to keep you from behaving or acting in a way that you feel is right or just, or to cover up their actions and to prevent things that they're doing from being shed, and you become the one who carries the brunt of that, and you become the one who is pushed down, oppressed, and not allowed to do or act or speak in order to preserve their agenda. And it's masked a lot of times in spiritual discipline. We need to discipline you because of this, and so preventing you from being able to do things, or making you feel guilty for bringing to light something that could jeopardize a ministry that's having a big impact. Well, if you called out this leadership flaw, do you know how many people wouldn't be ministered to because of that? And so there's this type of oppression that you sit underneath. And so that is one of the ways that spiritual abuse exhibits itself on the mission field. And not a lot of times, but there are instances where this is happening on teams that are highly productive. And that feeds into the reason why when it's brought up to somebody in authority, they don't want to pay much attention to it but there's so much good happening. Look at all the fruit that this team is bearing. And it might be the flagship team for the sending org or the church, or they just don't dig deep enough to actually listen to anybody else but the mouthpiece for that team. And that kind of gets to another unexpected struggle, is that, a lot of times, sometimes, not a lot of times, but sometimes the connection between the sending org and sending church can be with the team leader. And if the only avenue that you have for communication is to that team leader and they are communicating outside, then you may not ever actually be heard. If the person who's doing the asking isn't intuitive enough to be like, I want to hear from other women on the team, because maybe you're a guy and you don't necessarily have the eyes to hear and see what women might be struggling with. And so they sometimes don't even have an avenue to let their needs be known to people that could actually do something about it. I think sometimes some things that are surprising that women struggle with are being on the mission field and realizing that they have no vibrant relationship with God, that they have allowed their work to become something that is a checklist, and their personal relationship and their idea that God cares about them and their ability to grow just as much as the people he's sending them to doesn't exist. And so then they become embarrassed because they're like, I am put up on a pedestal in every other arena. My sending church, my family, thinks I'm this super spiritual person, but I'm really just dead inside spiritually. And I think that could be an unexpected struggle that people don't realize. Another one is they have trouble with friendships. It is so hard to keep friendships when you live cross culturally because people that you had before don't quite get your life. People that you're on the field with become a revolving door, and you begin to build this like callus on your heart that you don't even know is there, where you don't know how to be and let people in, be a good friend and let people in anymore. And so you have this, rehearsed thing that lasts only so long, but that's usually how long people let you in, and then you go on. And so you find out after you have been on the field a while, like, I don't know if I have any deep friendships people that really know me anymore. And so we did this whole thing with Velvet Ashes just about identifying that and how we can work to break through and actually still be good friends and have good friends as women who live cross culturally. And then I'd also say there's this, you know, hidden sin aspect of, I did a workshop at a big conference a year or two ago, and we just talked about the idea that some of their husbands struggle with porn. Honestly, probably some of the women that we were in there with struggle with porn, and the way that it is handled. I've walked with so many women and couples on the field. The way that it is handled is that all of the help goes to the husband. He's the one who's acknowledged the pain, acknowledged the sin, and he is the one who's getting the first aid. And the wife, because he didn't actually cheat, right? He didn't walk out on her, but yet she feels all of those things. But she is more like, just forgive him and walk with him, be a part of his healing process. And she feels so betrayed and doesn't have any of the help. Nobody's walking with her about how do you forgive and decide if you're going to open up your trust him again. And so you have these women on the mission field who, if their sending organization hasn't already sent them off, because there are some that have a zero tolerance policy, because of that, a lot of this is never revealed. But those who do feel brave enough to reveal it then are doubly hurt when they aren't cared for well themselves.
Mm.
Just their husbands are being cared for. So there's these lots of unexpected hidden struggles that women face while they're on the field that take people who are willing to not take things at face value, but to dig in, to connect, to be educated and aware, to support them well.
Mm. You mentioned earlier too about the role, because I mean, women have so many roles they play. They play, if they have children, their wife, their mom, their sister, their aunt, whatever, so many different roles. And then sometimes I know some agencies, it's like they treat the wife as an employee, and the employee's one role and the wife is another role. And there's kind of, they're very strict about, oh no, you're an employee, so we can ask you to do this regardless of what else you have going on, but you're the employee. So can you just talk a little bit about some of those roles that they have to juggle?
Yeah, I would say this is such a nuanced thing because there's some people that view you as a team, right? And this is what you accomplish as a team, husband and wife. There's some that view the husband as full-time and the wife could be part-time, or the wife could be no time, right? The wife could just be an add-on who's just there. And so I think that how each sending orgs structures that really plays into a lot of how women operate on the field. But I would say that the consistent thing is, are there safe avenues where women are allowed to have connection to somebody where decisions are being made, right? So or even if the wife is viewed as an employee, if she's married, is her husband the only one who has a voice where decisions are being made? And I feel like that many people would be fine with that. And many marriages are in a place where he does know his wife really well and he would communicate well for both of them, but that's not always the case. And we have been in touch, even someone that was on our Velvet Ashes team was in an abusive relationship while a missionary on the field. And he, when she got brave enough to say, I'm being physically harmed by my husband, he went ballistic. And, it's just like on the mission field, these things are still happening. And so if that was happening quietly, but nobody was taking the time to give her a voice where decisions are being made, she would, maybe still be in that position. So there's, lots of different types of scenarios, different roles that women juggle when they're on the field. I think, if we could even jump back to you were talking about single versus married, because I feel like that's a dynamic in different ways that they carry those roles, right? So I think so I have a really great, my director of operations is named Sarah, and she is a single, served on the field, and oh my goodness, I value her input so much. She always has an eye out for how is the content we're producing actually meeting the needs of single women as well. We're not just only talking to married women, because of course that's my default. That's the role I lived in. But um, I think some of the things that we don't take into account, the role, what single women, okay, the misconception I think people have with married women is that they always feel heard and that they always have a friend and they always have a relationship, because sometimes that's a very lonely place and they don't actually have that. Their husband does not provide that for them. But single women, one of the things that we did a podcast on was women in leadership. And that plays out differently because there are different views of complementarian and egalitarian. And so we interviewed a team leader's wife who was very much, egalitarian role. And then we interviewed a team leader who herself was single, and she was in charge not only of the team, but of the region. And it was just fascinating to hear how each of these different roles exist and where they live on the field in that. Um, and she was saying, as a single team leader, she goes, sometimes team meetings are the hardest for me because we've talked, discussed, different things have come up, and then they get to go home and debrief by themselves. And I go home to my cat or to an empty apartment, and I don't get to necessarily talk with somebody about, oh man, that hit me weird, or that changed, or did you hear it this way? Because I heard it this way. And all of that processing that comes along. And so she's had to, being the team leader is a different dynamic, but she's had to formulate a safe group of people that check in on her. So they know when her team meeting schedules are, and they check in on her and be like, what do you need to process from that team meeting? I knew you were expecting this to happen. Did this happen? And, just invite those kind of conversations in so that those single people have some type of a debrief. And a wise team leader, if with singles on their team, will realize, okay, you don't have that. How can we provide that for you after each team meeting? A safe place for you to process and feel heard about. Um, just like being aware that the admin activities that you're sharing with a spouse are all on the single person. And so that isn't a shared load. They have to write the newsletters and do the taxes and find the expense reports and do everything and the ministry on top of that. And so that is a double burden for some people that, in a marriage, you might like, she's the admin person. She really gets it. And you don't even have to mess with that. That's all on one single person. So just like having the foresight to understand that. Um, and if you're having a team meal, where are the singles sitting? Are they relegated to the kids' table? Are you having conversations that only happen with marrieds and your single friends don't know where to sit? Even the way a room is set up. So the single team leader that we talked to said, when you're having a team meeting and you have a bunch of places that are gonna leave one man out, I don't get to go claim this love seat for me and my spouse. And, just like being thoughtful of when I walk into a room, am I going to be awkwardly placed somewhere? Or have you thought about, there's spaces for me that don't make me feel awkward. And so I don't know, there's just different things. Who do they vacation with? You know, uh, they might feel like a tag along in every situation. Are you providing opportunities for them to not feel like a tag along, but inviting them into your family? So there are single people are an amazing resource on a team in so many ways. Again, another podcast we could do, right? Yeah. But I think when you think about the roles that women play, especially single women, I think if you are ministering with them and you're on a team with them, is some work that you could do to be a better teammate, to be a better team leader, to meet the needs of these single women who are on a team with you.
Now, as you're talking about married and singles and the various roles and responsibilities, and I guess what stood out to me and what you're saying is that they all need a voice. They need a way to be heard, a way to sit at the table and have a conversation and be understood and seen and known. and whatever it is that they're in, because they're all going to be struggling with something,
Right.
some level, in some
Right.
way. Um, but are they on a team where it's an open conversation, or do they have someone that's trusted in their world,
Hmm.
that will listen and will advocate for them as needed? And I can see that being a huge support and help.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if you're concerned with longevity for your team, that would be a huge win.
Yeah. Yeah, the burnout can be so high when people feel isolated and feel,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when there's spiritual abuse happening. And if there's
Yeah.
no, I mean, if the person in authority is the only one with a voice, and that's the person that's the abuser, I mean, that's just a catch-22 right there.
Yeah. Yeah. You're so right.
So, you've touched on this some already in terms of how a team can be more supportive of each other, but what about the church, the sending church? Um,
Mm-hmm.
what would you encourage them to do to better support single or married women on the field?
I was sitting with my husband this morning. I was just like, I said, what would you say to this question? Because he served as a executive pastor, missions pastor before his role now with Barnabas International, where he gets to care for missionaries. And so um, he goes, that's a good question. He goes, I'll tell you, he said, I don't know if I feel equipped to answer that. I was like, I feel like you do. But what he told me was really insightful. He goes, I'll just tell you, yep. So he and I get included in a lot of emails together. Our work complements each other. And so we were in an email together, and he goes, I was responding, and my response said, I'll let Denise weigh in on this. And he goes, and it just didn't sit right with me. And he goes, I was just looking at it, and it was like, I didn't feel like it was so ingrained in me to answer a question that way, but it looked like I had to give you permission to weigh in. And that was how I viewed women, is that they had to have permission to weigh in. And he goes, so I reworded it to be, I'd love to hear what Denise had to say on this. And he goes, that's a little thing, but if you aren't aware that you maybe unknowingly have some things that are ingrained in you that cause you to view women and put them in a certain light, it affects how you treat them. It affects how they receive care from you, because you may not even realize. Like I said, well, that would not have bothered me at all. But I love that his senses are up to that because of all the work that he sees me do with women, all of the work he's doing to make Barnabas an organization that doesn't have spiritual abuse in it. And so I would say in answer to that, you know, do some digging and see, is there anything I don't even know of that I have a preconceived way that I don't care for women well, just by how I normally flow through my day, my life, the words I use? Like that would be a little thing that you could do. I would say one of the things that I mentioned is, if you have regular calls as a sending church or a sending org, are you asking for the equal time or at least some time with the women? Can I just ask your wife how she's doing? Don't direct everything toward the husband in the situation. One thing I really loved about um, the sending church that I was with is that they began to be like, we do want to show women that we care for them. And so they began to buy the Velvet Ashes retreat for every single woman that they sold. And we actually have a membership that is an online community. It's like a safe Facebook community that is just women. It's an app, it's monthly content, it's spiritual formation, it's book club, it's all these things. So they just like said, we want to gift that to the women that we serve, because we know that we can't meet all of their needs, but we're hoping that this is a way that does that. And there's other places and ways you can do that. They would send money every year to be like, we don't know if this would get you to a retreat in Italy, but would you take some time and get away and just get into a hotel with a group or by yourself and just take some time, because we do care for you. We see you. We understand that you might feel like you're just a mom raising kids, but what you're doing is important. And just like turning your attention to them and helping them feel valued goes so far in helping them to feel seen and heard. I would say care for their kids. I can't tell you what it did to me whenever we had a team come and they brought people for my kids. They brought a VBS, or they brought things and we're like, we know you have some big meetings that need to happen, but we don't want you to just put your kids in front of a TV. So here's two people that want to have fun with your kids. That is actually their only role, is to have fun with your kids. I felt so loved because I didn't have to try to figure out how to keep my kids entertained while these big meetings were happening. And then, when we talk about those single women who may not have the circles, are you asking them, who are you talking to? How are you processing this? Do you have people that you feel safe with? Are we those people for you? If we're not, can we hold you accountable to find those people and make sure that you've got them? Just knowing the questions to ask and actually asking them. You may not be the answer, but the fact that you are aware that there are questions that should be asked is huge in caring for. And so, yeah, just bringing the care for women, not just because they're sent out from you, but because they literally are making up the biggest mission force on the mission field. And if we neglect to care well for them, what would the impacts of that be on the global kingdom work that's being done, right? It is a valuable thing to invest in. If you only invested in women, I don't recommend only investing in women, but if you did, it would still hold value.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a recognition that women are playing an important role in missions and we should care for them and not, it gets overlooked at times and not being, as a sending church, not overlooking that.
Right. And recognizing they have unique needs that are going to be a little bit different than the men that are serving. And that's not bad. It is just different. And so not a one-stop shop for member care.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a little touch on the local church or the sending church. So let's talk about the sending organizations as they prepare. Let's say they're recruiting, right, preparing people to go or putting a team together. That as they assemble the team, obviously they see there's some married couples, there's some singles, but just as they address the needs of the women on the team, what have you seen? Have you seen things done well? Have you seen things that haven't been done well?
Mhm. Absolutely. So one of the things I appreciate is we have people from sending orgs who are member care providers that regularly take advantage of content that Velvet Ashes puts out, that Global Trellis puts out, that, great resources, and they're doing their homework. They want to know what experiences are global workers going through, what struggles are they going through. They are actually not just sitting back, they're actively participating in understanding and being proactive in, oh, this is a trend that's happening on the field right now, and I want to do my work behind the scenes to better prepare those we're sending out to be ready for that, or to help mitigate the implications and the risk that they're enduring while they're on the field. And so do your research, read, be involved, watch the webinars, take the trainings, do the things that your global workers are doing so that you understand what they're going through so you can better prepare them. So, for example, one of the things that we didn't have on our radar was just how difficult friendships would be. So it totally took us off guard whenever we get to the field and like, why is this so hard? Why is our team not the best friends we thought they were going to be? We thought these were our people, And so if we had understood that and were better prepared for, hey, these are some skills that we could give you right now to help you keep friendships, develop new ones, hold space for revolving door friends, that would have been really helpful to us. But you have to understand and do your research to know how to train them and send them out well. Check in on them. One of the things, I know it's hard, in the support raised positions that so many people in sending orders are in, we had somebody assigned to us to care for us that was a revolving door. And it felt like every 18 months we were retelling our entire life story to somebody else. And it got to be like I would wish that you could meet that need for me, but I really don't think you're going to be here very long. And I don't want to go through the whole story of who we are, how we are, and what we're dealing with every few months. And so, like, if there's any way that you can create consistency, if there's other roles that fluctuate, create consistency in the roles that care for the people that are on the field, that's so important in some level. Maybe there's somebody that can be a paid position that can be there longer than a revolving door of people. respond to their newsletters, the things that, they put so much effort into actually being, and then be personal with them, get to know them individually and care for them in individual ways, not just the blanket. We sent out this water bottle with our logo on it to everybody for Christmas, and we hope you feel cared for. But, like, Denise, we really know that you love tea, and I just wanted you to know I thought of you with this tea, and I hope you can try it next time you're home. You don't even have to send it to me, but you knew I liked it. You thought of me when you were at the supermarket, and you took time to send me an email that was just to me. And so the personalized ways that we respond and connect can go really far in building trust and helping me be like, you know what? I know that they are so connected to me that I feel like I could probably reach out and be okay with telling them that I'm struggling in this place right now. It creates that trust relationship when you get personal with those that you send out. And when you have a sending org or a sending church that does that, I keep using them interchangeably because some sending churches fill the need of a sending org in the way that they care for their global workers, but it is a white elephant in the room. And when other people that you're serving with in a community hear about the way that you are cared for, they're like, are you kidding me? They do that. They hear, they what, and you become this like, weird anomaly because it's not always done well. And when you can be a part of an org that does it well, global workers that you serve with will just be in awe of and jealous probably of, we wish we were cared for that way.
It can be a real blessing for so
Yeah.
many who are struggling. And I like it that what you're saying is you're building trust and relationships so that it's not, hey, we're just going to show up when it's bad and when you need help and you're in crisis, and then we're going to tell you what to do. But there's a relationship that's just in the everyday as much as possible, so that there's trust for the hard times.
Yeah.
I think that's so valuable for the church and the agency to hear. Um, I think often churches and organizations are willing to step in the crisis mode time, but not in the everyday.
Yeah, the whack-a-mole scenario, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I get that resources are probably spread thin and stuff. So it does take some intentionality, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the struggles and the hard things, and what I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit to what are ways you see women thriving and
Mhm.
doing well in the field.
I think my favorite way when I see women thriving is when they're leaning into their own unique gifts that the Lord gave them. And so I love when I see in our community people who are using talents. Like we've got this one woman in our community who's a great artist, and she is using that and creating content and resources. And the Lord has given her a platform to minister to the locals and nationals, but also to the global worker community. And she's writing children's books. And she's like, that wasn't on her radar when she went to the field, but yet she has found that there's a place for her uniquely shaped gifts where she's serving or writing books. We have so many. The sad thing about hosting a podcast that tells the legacy stories is that there aren't as many women writers as there are men, especially when you look back. And so when we see women who are taking the time to write their story, to document what the Lord is doing, we cheer that on, and we want to equip women to be able to do that because their stories matter. And so when we have several women who are authors who are writing for different publications or producing content and books themselves. And so I love to see that. We've got several women who are thriving in that area. And just like women are naturally wired to be a little more empathetic. And sometimes, I think in our world they can view that as not a plus, right? So they like, you're too emotional or you're too over the top or whatever. But when they realize that maybe that thing that makes them cry and be moved to tears is something that God is using to motivate them to action or to care for people that are forgotten and to take the time to have the conversation that nobody has ever had with them. You see so many women that are just thriving in their small circles of influence, and they're making a difference, like the starfish story, to this one and to this one. And it's the way that God is using how they're uniquely created as a woman and sometimes in cultures where that's not welcomed and people still need that. And so what we see is women thriving in all sorts of different ways when they just lean into how God uniquely created them and ask him, please help me to find how you want me to fit in the place that you have placed me. And the stories just run wild from there.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Hmm.
You know, I what do you think is different about that? I mean, I could guess from what you shared, but it sounds a little bit like an attitude that
Mm,
helps them shift towards this not just
yeah.
surviving but thriving.
I think yes. And I think that the biggest alignment is their realization that they matter to God as much as the people they're serving matters to God.
Hmm.
Because I think sometimes it's like there's so much at stake and only I matter. And sometimes, honestly, we talk about sending orgs, we didn't touch on this, but when it's a check the box and meet the quota and do all of this, you can lose that I matter to God, even if the ministry isn't going the way I hoped and we're not seeing the fruit we hoped in this season. But when the women believe that they matter to the Lord and their relationship to God matters to the Lord, you see them caring better for people. You see them thriving. You see them not shriveling up like raisins, right? You see them doing well. So mostly when I see these women that I'm referring to, that I'm picturing in my mind right now, they got that figured out. They don't hold themselves to this quota mentality of that's the only way I have worth is if
Hmm.
I meet
Hmm.
this. So um they tend to have worked through a lot of stuff to where they understand that those that send them, those from their passport culture, those from their sending org, don't intend to misunderstand them, right? They don't intentionally want hurt them by the way they're handling or not handling things well, and they tend to default to grace first before anger. They're like, I really believe the best of them. I know they're really trying. I feel like they have this default grace instead of default anger, and anger is such a thing on the field. I don't know if you guys had that experience where you were at, but so many people had to really fight against my default being anger.
Hmm.
And so when they can default to grace, not only for sending orgs, but for their teammates and for the locals and for the work that the Lord has them to do, I think that they really tend to thrive a little bit better. And they have also been able to invite others in to their life. They haven't formed that cocoon against deep relationships. They are willing to still be hurt. They find that the trade-off is better to open up yourself enough to be hurt by somebody than to keep people at arm's distance. And so
Hmm.
when you find a woman who's gotten to that place, she's going to be okay.
Hmm.
She may not always remain on the field, but she's going to be okay.
Hmm. And I think it's interesting. Somewhere she's is being or has been affirmed in that too. And that,
Mm,
so whether it's writing or art or some other expression that, um, someone has affirmed her or is affirming her, and that gives her the freedom to keep going that way. Because just as
absolutely.
easily, someone could be discouraging or critical or something. It's like, that's not why you're here. This is not what this is about. And really just shut down
Yeah,
uh, uh, an expression that God has given this person.
it's so true. Which, I mean, that just goes back to all of the things we talked about with team and with people around and the way team reacts to women and their gifts. And so, yeah, I think it's a full circle.
Yeah. I A few years ago I talked with a career missionary, very famous missionary, and he was extremely is, artistic. But he said, I'm on the mission field. I have to set that aside. I'm not here for that. And later in his missionary career, he took the time to try to put down on paper, in canvas, in art, some of those early experiences of their life. And he says, I just so regret that I didn't let myself do it at the time. He said, this is a recreation of what I remember, but at the time it was so much more vivid. And so he just hadn't made the room in his own life for something like that. So,
Oh, that's such a great word to encourage people just to,
Yeah,
because it too.
it was surprising. It's like you had no idea that this was part of this person's life, but the work they produced was spectacular, and and it told such rich stories.
Well,
But
and that God might use the emotion that he's giving you in the moment
yeah,
to create the art that you can't re-feel the exact same way you did in that moment. So you've
mhm,
actually just traded and lost that,
mhm,
what you might have produced.
yeah. Well, you've mentioned some resources, but maybe just again, kind of go over some of the resources that Velvet Ashes offers, as well as other resources you know of that could be encouraging
Mhm.
uh, to women on the mission field, or yeah, just so that our listeners might be interested in.
Yeah, well, I would just love to invite anyone to be a part of our Velvet Ashes community. We've got, things that you might pay to experience, but check us out at velvetashes.com. We love serving women. And I would just say some of the things that we have found have been really impactful as we have served our community. Again, I'll mention the Silencing the Lambs webinar that we have, and then anything by Amy Young and Sue Enigenberg, two authors that are writing in the space. The one book that was really helpful as it was dealing with how do missionaries welcome Gen Z and Gen Alpha onto the field, because there's such a difference in philosophy and life and ministry. And we're finding that there's this clash happening on the field right now. So there's this book called Mobilizing Gen Z that was really helpful in understanding those Gen Z people that are heading to the field and how you can welcome them to the table so that you're not just forming this clash. Permission to Mourn is a book written by Ruth Potenu, and she is a woman serving on the field. And it's just a beautiful story about book that digs into the grief that is experienced sometimes when you're serving cross culturally. Sacred Siblings is a great book that we use. We also did a webinar with them. A lot of times when we find a good book, guys, we try to have them on and do some sort of webinar at Velvet Ashes with them. Um,
We've
so
been known
yes,
to
but
do that as well.
right? Yeah, yeah. When we love it, we love to share. So, yeah. So those are some things off the top of my mind that are just great resources that you can dig into.
Mm.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I know that there are women all over the world that will continue to benefit, and I hope that it continues to grow um, as people discover you guys from every corner of the world and find
Oh,
ways to get plugged in and not be isolated. I think,
yeah,
as we talked about, a lot of the struggles that women are facing probably are due to isolation at times and that
yeah,
loneliness. So I just love what you guys are doing, how you're able to bring women together. What a gift that is. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate the opportunity to just sit with you. It's always a pleasure to get to chat with you guys. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you, Denise.
So, Steve, tell me what was the highlight for you for this conversation?
Well, we certainly covered a lot of ground, I feel like, in this conversation, and Denise had a lot of great things to share. A statement she said a couple different times that caught my attention: you don't have to have all the answers, but you can ask the questions. And so you may not have an answer for someone, but even taking the time to ask the question and just show the interest and to try to hear and listen to them, I just, that struck me as something significant, meaningful you could do for someone.
Yeah. I was really encouraged by just her awareness that women are valuable in what they're doing all over the world, and that God cares about them just as much as the people they're serving. And that is kind of a line I say to guests here all the time. And I really do think that that makes a huge shift in people's mentality. And when they're able to see themselves as someone who's loved by God, and not just for what they do, but who just because he does it, not their merit, not their, their worth doesn't come from being a missionary. right?
Yeah, and it can be so easy to think of the list, or I've got to do this, got to do that, and that's where my worth is coming from.
Yes. So I just hope that this whole conversation was an encouragement to many of you, and that you look in our show notes and find those resources and reach out and really get the encouragement that you might need.
Thank you for listening to the Innkeepers. Thank you for joining us for the Innkeepers podcast. Our mission at Sanctuary Inn is to equip, refresh, and restore God's global workers. We hope today's podcast was an encouragement to you, or maybe the podcast you heard today, you've been prompted to pass this along to someone you know that could benefit from today's conversation. Creating a podcast is a team effort. Cara and I prepare and do the interviews, and we're grateful for the time that our guests give us out of their busy lives to help us learn more about missionary care.
We want to thank Tim Downing for the music he wrote and performed for the Innkeepers podcast. Tim is a very talented musician, and you can find out more about Tim at downingkeys.com. Our podcast is edited by Javier Bolanos, and our website and show notes are prepared by Micah Githens, my amazing husband. You can visit the Sanctuary Inn website to see more of Micah's great work at sanctuaryinn.org.
Thank you for joining us on our journey to learn more about missionary care.